So let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to start off today by going over y'all's quiz that you guys took on Friday. I've graded those and I returned those to you all. If you completed it, if you did not complete it, you need to complete it immediately. So let's take a look at some of the questions, okay? You will, and I'll go over our checklist here in just a minute. Let's go over this. So what are proteins? Remember, proteins are capable of many things, right? We can use them for like skeletal muscle, enzymes. In the video, I give a lot of examples, and even in the chart in the PowerPoint, there are many examples of proteins. So they can do a lot. And the real dead giveaway here are the elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Nucleic acids, on the other hand, tend to have some role with genetic information, right? DNA, RNA. It's the best answer for this one right here. Polymer that stores genetic information. Could be DNA or RNA. What are amino acids? Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, right? So they're going to be the subunit of polypeptide chains. Polypeptide is like another word for protein. Poly just means many. Peptide is talking about the chemical bond that holds the other amino acids together to form the protein. What are nucleotides? Nucleotides are tied together to form nucleic acids. So that's the answer there. DNA and RNA are both example of, they're both nucleic acids. The N and the A in both DNA and RNA stands for nucleic acid. Insulin, enzymes, and keratin. Insulin is the protein hormone that helps regulate blood sugar. Enzymes, we have these in our stomach and our mouth to help us break down food. And then keratin is actually the protein in your hair and your fingernails. So these are all proteins. So that'll be the answer. DNA, RNA, and ATP, these are all examples of nucleic acids, which would be formed from nucleotides. A basic subunit that contains sugar, phosphate, and nitrogen base, that is what nucleotides are made out of, right? They got a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base. Nucleotides tied together to form nucleic acids. Nucleic acids will always have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus or phosphate. Lactase, lipase, and polymerase, they all end in ASE, which is like a good dead giveaway for enzymes. Lactase helps us break down milk sugar. Lipase would be an enzyme to break down fat. And then polymerase is an enzyme we're going to talk a lot about later on in the semester. It's an enzyme that actually makes new DNA molecules. Chemical reactions form blank bonds between amino acids to form proteins. What is another name for a protein? A polypeptide. Poly referring to many, and then peptide being the bonds that hold the amino acids together. What determines the shape and function of a protein? Well, proteins are made out of amino acids, and it's the order or the sequence, right? The order of amino acids that determines the shape of the protein. You change the sequence, you change the order, the protein will fold or shape differently, and a different shape means a different function. You can tend to think of enzymes as like a lock and key, right? They have to fit the shape with the molecule they break down for them to work properly. Choose the group of terms most related to DNA. Well, let's look. I see deoxyribose here, and I see double-stranded helix, and I see nucleic acid. All three of those things definitely describe DNA. DNA contains deoxyribose. That's what the D stands for. Double-stranded, right? It kind of looks like that twisted ladder. And then nucleic acid is the group of biomolecules that it belongs to. Choose the group most related to proteins. Let's see here. So I'm going to be looking for amino acids, right? And I see amino acids down here, and I'm like, oh, shoot, now I have to choose between these two. And I see enzymes in both. So here I'm trying to decide between cellulose and peptide bonds. We've already talked a lot about peptide bonds and how they're used to build proteins. So I already know this is the correct answer. Now, you can also do process elimination. I know that cellulose is a carbohydrate, it's a sugar. So it has no business being in this list. So D is the best answer. What are the major parts of the nucleotide? Remember, a nucleotide is that sugar house, the phosphate, and the Nissan in the garage, the nitrogen base. It's just a funny little way that I came up with years ago to remember. So every nucleotide has the 5-carbon sugar, the phosphate, and the nitrogen base, right? So this is a sugar, this is nitrogen base, and that's a phosphate. So if you look around here, you're thinking, okay, it's going to be either one of these. And it's definitely this one right here, because this right here is a nitrogen base or a nitrogenous base. Okay. Choose the group of conditions most likely to denature an enzyme. And this word denature right here is just kind of like another word for like to destroy or to melt. Hold on one second. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to put this person in. Okay. So denature is another word for like to destroy or to like almost like melt an enzyme. And the two things that affect our enzymes the most are pH and temperature. So this is why our bodies are so concerned with trying to stay at 98.6 degrees. That's why we feel so crummy when we have a fever, or when we can feel our body shutting down, we get really cold, as the extreme temperatures are denaturing our enzymes. And our enzymes are these little biomolecules that catalyze reactions. So if they become damaged, then the chemical reactions can't happen in our bodies. And that could leave us very sick, very ill, or even lead to death. And then pH is also really important. There's different pHs throughout our body. Obviously, our stomachs are going to be acidic and our blood is slightly basic. And so the enzymes that work and function in those different areas have a different like range of tolerance or preference for pH. If the enzymes in your stomach were probably too exposed to like pure water or to a base, they might not function properly because they're used to an acidic condition. What are enzymes? Let's see which of these. I definitely know they're polymers, right? They're proteins. They're going to be made of many amino acids, and they catalyze metabolic reactions. This word catalyze just means speeds up. And metabolic reactions, metabolic, or in time to talk about metabolism, it's the chemical reactions that build up and break things down in our bodies. So it's just, in other words, saying it speeds up our bodies and our cells. Without enzymes, chemical reactions would happen too slowly in our bodies. What is ATP? ATP is a nucleic acid used to transfer energy throughout the cell. Which of the following best describes proteins or best relates to proteins? So I see molecules used to catalyze reactions. That would be an enzyme, so that sounds good. Support our immune system. For sure, we've got antibodies that our bodies make, and those are proteins, and they provide structure. Yeah, so like your skeletal muscle, those are proteins, so that's the best answer there. How does DNA differ from RNA? Well, DNA has two strands, RNA has a single strand, DNA has two strands, and deoxyribose, where RNA is one strand, and ribose. And then DNA has adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. So this is the best answer right here. Two strands, deoxyribose, and it has the four appropriate letters. RNA is the type of nucleic acid that has unit. And if you haven't already watched those videos that I've put together, please do so, because you're going to be missing out on a lot of information. What happens to an enzyme if the temperature gets too high or too low? It simply becomes denatured and does not function. Okay. All right. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look, a lot of things got posted, right? Don't worry too much about these things that just got posted. They're for our third unit, which will actually be starting on Wednesday. Let's take a look at our checklist for the week. So I'm going to do a little review with you guys to kind of go over carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids, because we're going to have our exam tomorrow. Our exam is multiple choice questions. It's, Google form. It's very similar format to the quizzes, and it's just kind of taking all of it together. So, we had our quiz on carbohydrates and lipids. We've taken our quiz on nucleic acids and proteins. Now let's put it all together. And that's what you guys are going to be working on tomorrow. All right. So our Zoom tomorrow is going to be really, really, really short. Wednesday. And then if you finish your exam early and you've got some extra time and you want to start looking at Unit 3, you can. If not, you can just wait till Wednesday. So Wednesday, we're going to start our new unit on photosynthesis and cell respiration. And like the title of the unit is cell metabolism, because photosynthesis and cell respiration are two very, very important chemical reactions that occur in living organisms. Thursday, there's a video that I'm going to share with you guys. We'll check out. We'll Zoom. We'll talk a little bit about photosynthesis. And then on Friday, there's no Zoom. Friday, there will be no Zoom. You'll have to take a quiz on photosynthesis and make sure to turn in your vocab and your little video questions if you had not already. Okay. So the big thing is tomorrow we have our exam. So before let's see here. Let me get my little whiteboard. If you have a piece of paper handy, it might be really helpful uh, for you to write down what I'm writing down up here, because I'm just going to make like a little cheat sheet. You can always screenshot this when I'm done, right? But I really think it'd be helpful for you just to write this out on a piece of paper so that you have this for your exam tomorrow, okay? So we need to break. We've got the 4 categories, right? We got carbohydrates, we got lipids, we have proteins, and we have our nucleic acids, okay? And let's just, I'll put them into little separate categories, okay? So the first thing that I think is important to recognize is, like, you know, what are some examples, right? Or what should I think of when I see these words? Well, with carbohydrates, I want you to think of sugar, right? They're short-term energy, right? Lipids, I want you to think about fats, oils, and waxes, right? So, like, you know, our belly fat, the oil our skin makes, and even the earwax would all be an example of a lipid. And then proteins, you know, proteins can do a lot of things, right? I kind of think of them as like the Swiss Army knife of the cell. You know, you can use the Swiss Army knife to do lots of things, but probably one of the more important things that proteins do is they act as enzymes, right? Which means they speed up chemical reactions. And, you know, they've got lots of other functions, right? And so I'll put and lots more, right? They can be skeletal muscle, they can be in our hair, they can be like signaling proteins sticking out of the side of a cell. The list goes on and on and on and on. And then nucleic acids, one of the big ones there. So when you think of nucleic acids, just think of like the N and the A and D and A, right? And then it's little buddy RNA. These molecules, they work together to make us who we are, right? And so the NA, DNA, nucleic acid, RNA, nucleic acid. Okay. Now, what else do you need to know about them? Or what's another way that we can separate them out? Is the elements that they have. Carbohydrates have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Lipids have it as well: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? So they have the same 3 elements. The major difference, though, is carbohydrates tend to have twice as many hydrogens as they do carbon and oxygen. It's actually usually written as like a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. Proteins will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. And then nucleic acids will have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus, okay? Now, what else can we write down about our biomolecules? Well, the subunit. What are they built out of, right? What's like their smallest component? For carbohydrates, it's a monosaccharide. Mono meaning one, and then saccharide coming from a Greek word, saccharide. Saccharide, which means sweet, right? So single sweet, single sugar. And you know, and then we have our lipids, right? Our lipids are going to be made out of glycerol and, I think this one's easy to remember, fatty acids. There are different fatty acids in different foods. That's why butter is solid at room temperature and olive oil is liquid at room temperature. They contain different fatty acids. They're both lipids, right? They're both going to be fats, oils, and waxes. Proteins, they're made out of amino acids. A lot of athletes can actually go to GNC and buy containers of amino acids to help them build skeletal muscles. So amino acids. And then nucleic acids are made of nucleotides. I always think nucleotide tied together to form nucleic acids. Okay. And then let's talk about their main function, right? So what does our cell use them for? For carbohydrates, that's going to be short-term energy. So quick energy. You know, if you think about Halloween, you know, you eat a bunch of sugar and you get a sugar rush, right? You get a sudden burst of energy, but it doesn't last you very long. So carbohydrates are mostly for short-term energy. Lipids, you know, there are lots of different functions, but one of the main functions is long-term energy, right? So we can store energy for later as belly fat, right? So long-term energy. And another thing they do is they're also really important for forming our cell membranes, right? So the outside layer of every single one of your cells in your body is actually made of a layer of phospholipids. So they're found in our membranes. What about proteins? Well, you know, since they do so many things, right? But the main one for enzymes, right, is they act as a catalyst, which means these enzymes speed up chemical reactions, right? So they can act as a catalyst. And then a lot of them are structural, right? So they're a part of the structure of our cells. They're parts of structures of our body. Like I said, our fingernails, our hair, my skeletal muscle. What about nucleic acids? You know, it's all about genetic information, right? It's how our cells store and use the genetic info, the genetic information or genetic code, right? So it's all about genetics, right? All about our genes and kind of making us who we are. And you know, it's pretty neat when you start to study DNA. You'll see that, you know, between different organisms, there might be more or less DNA in common. You know, like 50% of your DNA in common with a banana. And then the last little box I'll put on here are just some examples, right? So what are some examples of carbohydrates? Well, if you have just one, probably famous one is glucose. Glucose is a very famous monosaccharide. In candy and in soda, you've got a disaccharide known as sucrose. And then in a loaf of bread or in a potato or in pasta, you have starch, right? This is a polysaccharide. It's a big sugar. That's for plants. And then in my muscles, my body will store some sugars as glycogen, which is why the guy can go to the gym. Glycogen, go to the gym. And then plants can also use some sugar to make cellulose, which is a part of their structure. They use it to make the cell wall. That's why plants are kind of rigid and not like soft and smushy like, you know, like my skin is. What are some examples of lipids? Well, you know, these are some examples up here: fats, oils, and waxes. But, you know, you've got things like triglycerides, right? This is the kind of fat that you find floating around in your bloodstream or stored in a cell in belly fat, right? And they call that adipose tissue. And then you've got, again, the lipid that makes up the cell membrane, which is the phospholipid. Phospholipid. It's kind of easy to remember that one because it says lipid in the name. And then what about proteins? What are some examples of proteins? Oh, I gotta let this person back in. Well, you've got, you know, obvious ones, right? It's like a very obvious protein would be muscle, right? Our muscles are actually made of two special types of protein, actin and myosin. In our immune systems, we have antibodies. These are actually proteins that help fight infections for us, or I guess I should say with us. Since our white blood cells are going to be doing work as well. And then again, there are enzymes, right? So like in our spit, we have an enzyme known as amylase. And amylase breaks down amylose. That's why, you know, I was eating crackers earlier. So there's starch in this saltine cracker. And a really important part of digestion are enzymes. And so when I put this saltine in my mouth, my saliva contains this enzyme right here, amylase. And I don't even necessarily need to chew this cracker. If I just put it in my mouth, the enzymes will slowly break it down, right? Then I can chew it up and then I can swallow it. So it just speeds up digestion. And then last but not least, we have our nucleic acids. What are some examples? Well, I already kind of threw some up there. You've got DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. You've got RNA, which is ribonucleic acid. And then you got another one that we haven't talked much about, but we're going to talk a lot about it in the new unit, Unit 3, is ATP. Okay. So if you want to take a minute, if you haven't, written this down, or you can screenshot this, this would be a nice little cheat sheet for tomorrow's exam, right? Just kind of an easy way of organizing all of the things together for each of the 4 categories. Okay. Now, what I also am going to do is go back to our desktop, and I am going to share a little like practice study quiz with y'all. We're not going to do it together, because I know people have different ways they want to study. I am going to send out a Kahoot for you guys, and it's multiple choice, timed questions for you to do today as a way to prepare for tomorrow's exam. Okay. I will have a short Zoom tomorrow to answer any questions that you may have, and just to quickly remind you about the exam and what's going to be on the exam, where to find the information. But that's all that I have today. I'll be posting this Kahoot practice quiz in the Google Classroom, and I will also send it to you in the Remind. Well, if you guys don't have any questions, what you need to do is